is Joann Benzinger, and I'm a fine art photographer from Travelers Rest, South Carolina. Welcome to my studio, where today I'll be using inkAID Clear Gloss Pre-Coat to prepare these beautiful textured pieces of paper so I can run them through my printer and get some amazing images. Come join me for an adventure. You won't want to miss this one. These papers came from Graphic Products Corporation. You can look it up online. This one is Thai Unru White, and I apologize if I am pronouncing it incorrectly. But it has this beautiful texture, and it's very friendly to all sorts of different images that you might be wanting to print. This is Colored Hemp on Lotka. And again, I apologize if I pronounced it incorrectly. Again, it has this beautiful texture, and it has just a little bit of color to it as well. This one, I believe, is called Seismic White, and I really love the pattern that it has on it, and I think it'll be real interesting to try a couple of prints on this one. These papers come in large sheets, usually around 22 by 30, so you'll have to cut them down to fit in your printer, and I am all set up to do that here, so let's get going. You'll need to have a cutting mat so you don't damage your work surface, an X-Acto knife, a straight edge, and of course your paper. We've cut our papers down to a size that we can run through our printer without any problem. We're going to coat them with inkAID Clear Gloss Pre-Coat. I've sorted my papers so that similar papers are on top of each other and similar sizes are also on top of each other. I'm going to do this in two different stacks. And the reason I do them in a stack is because this paper is thin. You can see through it. So when I put the pre-coat on, it's likely to soak through And rather than have all of that soak down to my craft paper underneath, I'm going to have it soak through to the next piece of paper, and that way I won't be wasting any of my product. I've covered my work surface with some craft paper so that I don't have to worry about anything getting on any of my work surfaces. I think I'm going to work in a horizontal position. I have my inkAID pre-coat here, and I'm just going to give it a nice gentle turn to make sure that it's mixed up properly. This clear coat doesn't tend to separate as much as some of the other coatings do, but I do like to give it a little turn just to make sure. I'm going to pour some into a separate container so that I don't have to dip into the original container, and I can also seal this back up. Number one, I don't have to worry about bumping it and spilling it, and number two, I don't have to worry about any evaporation. I like to use the flat brushes because they cover a lot of surface and they don't leave any marks behind. This one is fairly soft and it's a good size for these papers. So this is the one I'm going to be using. You don't have to use anything special, and you certainly don't have to use your finest brushes. So I'm going to go back and forth. I'm being fairly generous with how much I'm using because I want to make sure that there's a even coat on my paper. I don't want to miss any spots. That's why I go back and forth and up and down as well. That's going to make sure that the inkAID product soaks into all the little crevices in the paper. I have prepared a plastic sheet for this to dry on. So once I get this sheet coated, I'm going to peel it up. You see how much soaked through to the next piece? So I'm going to peel this up and then I'm going to go lay it down on a flat piece of plastic. The reason I put them down on a piece of plastic to dry is so that they don't stick to any other surface. If I put them down on this craft paper to dry, there's a good chance that the papers would stick to each other. For your plastic surface, you can use a trash bag. I have a lot of large size cellophane plastic envelopes that I get when I make large prints. So I just cut one of those and laid it out flat on my floor. I like to do these in a batch because if I've got all my materials out, I might as well just go to town and have at it. As you can see, the inkAID pre-coats actually go pretty far. I've had to refill this once for that stack of papers. This is, gosh, less than a quarter cup of liquid that I'm putting in there, probably just a few tablespoons. So you can imagine with a jar this size, 1 pint, that's going to cover a lot of surface. You may decide that you need to do 2 coats to make sure that your coverage is good. That is perfectly fine. I wait for it to dry and then make that evaluation whether or not I need to add another coat. One thing that may enter into making that decision is how thirsty is the paper that you're working with. Some papers are going to absorb a lot more product than other papers. So you may decide you need to put that extra coat on. Other papers, 1 will be plenty. Not going to quite make it through that stack, so we're going to refill one more time. And since I have another stack of papers, I'm going to be generous with it. Asking, is it essential to go all the way to the edge with these pre-coats? No, it is not. You need to put the coating down anywhere you expect to print your image. So if this is going to be your print surface right here, you really only need to have that pre-coat between those points. I like to coat mine completely unless I know going in that it's going to be a smaller image. Or if I'm using it creatively like I did with the matte, the white matte on the black watercolor paper. So for that entire batch of papers, where I had 2 different stacks, some smaller papers and some larger papers, I was able to coat them all using probably less than a half a cup of pre-coat. So let's just see what's it look like underneath. See, some of it did soak through. So it's a good thing that we did them in a stack like that. All right, guys, I'm going to call that done. Now, you may be looking at this and thinking, well, look at all those places that she missed. But I just want to reassure you, I did not miss them. I went over this entire surface. Obviously, some of it soaked through further than other places, but it is entirely coated. If I look at it from an angle, I can see that it's coated. So I have no doubt in my mind that this will run through my printer and all of these surfaces the ink will adhere to. I'm going to go put this on the plastic that I've got laid out and let it dry, and then I'm going to come back and clean up. I have very little left in here, but I am going to pour it back into the jar. There were no impurities in it. This was not one of those processes where I feel any hesitation about pouring that little bit back in my jar. I've used 2 different brushes for my cleanup process. I'm going to start by just using one of these handy dandy wipes that we all probably have a million of. And I'm just going to squeeze any excess out. I'm going to set my brushes aside. I will wash these with warm soapy water, but for now I'm just going to clean up my work surface. This can be used again, so I'm just going to set it aside. And I'm going to use one of those wipes again to wipe off my cutting mat, because I do not want any residue on there. And that should do it. If you're using a container that you want to use again, you can just simply wipe it out with one of your wipes. And again, warm soapy water will clean it all up. It'll be ready to use again. Or if you're using something that you're not attached to, you can just go ahead and toss it. And that is the cleanup process. Usually when I print to a surface that's not really intended to be used through a printer, something like watercolor paper or these pretty textured papers, I will want to tape them down to a carrier sheet so that when they feed through my printer, the gears inside the printer will recognize it as paper and pull it through the way it's meant to. If I just sent a black piece of watercolor paper through my printer, the printer wouldn't recognize this as anything because it's black, and so it wouldn't feed it through the print mechanism and it would just sit there. So if I tape this down to a carrier sheet, which is nothing more than a blank sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11 will do for most sizes. This one is 11 by 14 sheet. So whatever size you need to accommodate your specialty paper, if you tape it down to the sheet, this part of your paper will be recognized by your printer and it'll have no problem pulling this through the printer and then allowing the print to land on your surface. I'm going to attach this one to a carrier sheet of paper and do a few others and we'll be set to go. So I've got my carrier sheet of paper, and again, that's nothing more than a piece of 8.5 by 11 copy paper. And I am going to tape this piece down to it. I want to make sure that I do the leading edge, which is going to be the part that feeds into the printer first. And I'm going to do at least part way on both sides, particularly the side where the print head rides across it. I don't want to have anything that's loose or sticking up. So I'll be using masking tape to secure my paper to the carrier sheet. So I have made sure that my tape doesn't go past the edge of the paper. So I don't want to have a sticky side down on this side. I want to make sure that the tape is entirely on the paper. It would be fine for me to tape it here, like in from the border of the paper, but I don't want my tape to exceed that edge. Okay, and then I'm just going to make sure I run my finger along that seam. Make sure everything is secure. When you get this ready to go through the printer, you'll just want to make sure that your print is set on the paper within this boundary. You don't want to print on the tape. That part of your image won't be visible because the tape is going to be peeled up afterwards. So this one is going on an 11 by 14 sheet of paper. I am still going to make sure to snug this top piece at the top of my paper. But you can see that these side edges will be within that boundary. Okay, so you see how this tape doesn't come all the way to the edge of the paper? That's going to be just fine because the printer is going to see this paper and it knows to pull this through the printer. So I'm not concerned about lining this tape up with the edge of the paper. There's no need for that. I'm going to tape down this side as well. And then the only other thing to consider is if your papers have wrinkled at all during that drying process, if you notice that there are bulges in your paper, you may want to run a cool iron over them. That's fine. I wouldn't use a real hot iron or anything like that, but it is fine to run an iron over them. I always cover them with a sheet of paper, and so I will put the decorative paper down on my ironing surface, and then I'll take a piece of paper, put it over the top, and I'll iron that. I want to print this image on this paper. And I think that all the strings and just interesting texture that this paper brings to the table will be an interesting combination with all the threads in the photo. This paper is colored hemp on Lotka. And I am going to be using a sheet that is 11 by, I believe it's 17 inches long, 11 by 17. So that's the full size of the carrier sheet. The surface that I've got to print to is going to be about 7.5 by 10.5. So that tells me I know my print needs to be smaller than that. When I set up the page to print on, I'm going to need to make sure that I start my print more than an inch down from the top of the paper, because that's where the tape ends. So I need to be at least 1 inch down. And I'm probably smart to be 2 inches in, and that should give me plenty of space to print the image within the boundary of where that tape is. So I'm going to make sure there's a 2-inch border on either side. I'm going to be setting this up in Adobe Lightroom. You may have a different program that you need to work with, but I will walk you through my process. This is the image I've decided I'm going to be printing. I've already processed it so it looks the way I intend for it to look, and I did that through Adobe Lightroom. I am looking at it in the library module right now. In order to print this, I'm going to need to go to the print module. If you look at the top of your screen, if you're using Lightroom, it'll be over towards the right at the top of the screen. Click on print. That's going to bring us into the print module where you can set up a template that you can use over and over for your print jobs. I've got several of them set up. Right now I'm looking at one that was set up for an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. I'm going to change that because my paper for this particular image that I'm printing to is bigger than that. So I need to go into page setup. I'm going to go down to custom sizes. The paper that I'm using is actually 11 inches wide by 17 inches, so I'm not going to change those numbers. However, if you have different numbers in there, you may need to change it to whatever the dimensions of your actual carrier sheet are. Those are the numbers you're looking at here. The size of the carrier sheet that you have taped down the paper that you're going to be printing to. I'm leaving these margins as is, and I'm clicking OK. So here you can see that this is the size of the paper that has been defined. If you look up here, we know that I have chosen my Epson P900. Always make sure you're using the right printer. Click on OK. And now you can see that the dimensions of my paper have changed. So it is now 17 inches long by 11 inches wide. And this was simply the last thing that I printed on here, and yeah, there it is. All right, so let's make some changes to this. How do I change the image, first of all? Here. To make this easy for us, I'm going to simply delete this. And all I did was I clicked on it, so it had the bounding box around it, and then I clicked on delete. Then I'm going to come down here and grab the image I actually want to print. And it's going to come in at a very small size. It's just 2¼ inches by 3 inches. That's not the size I want to print. I want to print closer to 7½ by 10. So I'm going to come over to the right-hand side of my paper, and I'm going to scroll down here to the cell size. And under the section where it says Adjust Selected Cells, this is telling me the height and the width of it. And I know that I want my height to be, I'm going to go with 10 inches. So if I click on that and type in 10, if I have this checked here, lock to photo aspect ratio, if that box is checked, then when I type in a number here, this number is going to adjust accordingly so that the ratio remains the same. So I won't end up accidentally cropping my image. Let me show you what it looks like if I don't do that. So this is how not to do it. Okay, so now I've got this weird 2¼ by 10 inch picture that is weird. It's just not going to work. So I'm going to click outside of that box to accept it, but then I'm going to hit Command Z to undo it. Let's check it again. So now let's check that back on. Lock photo aspect ratio. And if I go up here this time and I type in 10 and then hit the tab button, do you see how this number changed? And what that did was it locked the aspect ratio of the photo. So I didn't lose any of the dimensions. I didn't lose any of my actual photo. The whole thing is there. And the width of the picture adjusted to match the height. I'm going to make this just a tiny bit smaller because I really want to make sure I get the whole image on the paper. So I'm going to go 7.25. Hit the tab, and there you see again, this is now just under 10 inches. So we know that is going to easily fit on my paper. Next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this is just over 1 inch down from the top. So you see where that yellow line is over on the left-hand side of my screen? When I move my cursor, that yellow line moves. That's telling me where my cursor is in relation to the sides of the paper. So this would be about the 1 inch mark. I'm going to move my image up just a little bit. And now when I hover over the top of the image, it's at about 1¼ inches. So I know that that is far enough down that it will start the print on the paper. I'm looking at the left-hand side and the right-hand side, and I should fall just barely in there. All right, so if I go with 6.75, it's going to be a 9-inch tall print. If I hover on the right-hand edge, that is within that 2-inch margin. And on this side, I am within the 2-inch margin as well. I'm within the 1-inch margin. We are good to go. All right. The next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I've got enough resolution to print it at this size. So if I come down here and go to the print job, If I click on this checkbox next to print resolution, did you see how that number went away? Come over here to the top of your screen. I'm going to click it on and off again and watch what happens. Okay, the information that I'm gleaning from this is that if I don't tell my printer what resolution to use, at the dimensions I've specified, this 6.75 by 9 inches, it is going to print at 336 ppi. That's telling my printer how much ink to spit out on the paper. Most home printers are not going to be able to spit out that much ink. A fine art print is 300. Most home printers will print at 240. Bottom line here is, depending on your printer, if I tell my printer to use 336, it's going to spit out more ink than I need to on the paper, and I'll be wasting ink. So if you come down here and type in 240, that is telling your printer that's how much ink this image needs to have at this size, and that is how much it's going to spit out on your paper. Just a little bit of information to help you save on your ink. The other thing to remember is that you don't want that number to be too low. If you put in 150 thinking you're going to save ink, you're actually not going to save any ink, because you will be reprinting your image because it just doesn't look good at 150 ppi. So just a couple of thoughts on resolution for you. All right, so I am ready to print. There are a couple of other things that we're going to look at over here. I'm going to leave this color management to manage by my printer. If you are very familiar with your printer and you know that your prints come out dark, if you click this print adjustment, you can brighten it up by a certain amount. My printer does pretty good. I would say if you brighten yours between 7 and 11, that's probably a great plenty, and it'll just make your print a little bit brighter. What you want to remember is that when you're looking at your screen, it's backlit, and so everything appears brighter than it does when you actually print it on paper. So print adjustment, and increase that by just a little bit. Then I'm going to click Printer. Confirm that I have chosen the correct printer. Yes, I have. I want a single copy. I'm going to click on Printer Options and Printer Settings. I'm going to click on the media type, and I am going to use this Ultra Premium Photo Paper Luster. And what that's telling the printer is use the settings that you would use for a luster photo paper. I have found that that works really well with the inkAID products. Let's go with high quality here. And I'm going to click OK, and then I'll need to come back and print and hit print as soon as I get my paper loaded. And I'm going to hit print. And here we go. Ooh, it's like watching paint dry. Be patient. And there it goes. Look at that yummy texture on that paper. Isn't that great? Oh, I can't wait to see this. And hooray, you can see that we have started that print below the tape line. Yep, we're good on both sides. Yay! Yummy, look at that. Oh yes, here it comes. All right, are you ready? Here it comes. moment we've been waiting for. Dun, da, 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 da. That looks pretty. Oh my gosh. Oh my word, would you look at that? Okay, this is what I'm talking about when I say you have to choose the right image for the right surface. Could this be any better? Look at all that beautiful texture. I'm afraid I don't want to touch it yet because it hasn't had time to cure. But oh my gosh, look at that. It's perfect. That is absolutely amazing. I don't want to stop filming. It's pretty cool. Wow. Nice, nice, nice. Love it. Love it. Love it. Oh my goodness, it's beautiful. Oh my goodness, it's absolutely gorgeous. Look at that. Look at that. Beautiful lines from the paper. That's going to be a really nice print. That was a success. Okay, I have my paper loaded. My printer is turned on. Hooray, the print is falling within the tape boundary on all sides. Oh, the anticipation. Here it comes. And it's out. And that is beautiful. It's a great print. After I've let my print cure overnight, I always give them a coat of varnish. It's going to make the colors pop. It's going to provide some UV protection and protection from scratches. Oopsie daisy. All right, word to the wise. Don't do it in the breeze. I like to use Krylon UV archival. I prefer gloss, but they make it in a satin and a matte as well. And this one I'm going to experiment with. So this is a water-based one that it doesn't have the smell that this lovely one will. You notice I'm outside, and that's because this is something you want to use in a well-ventilated area. This one I'll do a little bit later, and if I like it, I'll show you the results. So for now, because I'm outside and it is slightly breezy, I'm going to just put a tiny little bit of tape on the corners. I just want to make sure that they don't blow away, they don't topple. It's just the way it is. So a tiny little bit of tape is going to help keep things in place. And hopefully I'll keep them within the camera shot so that you can see. And I am going one on the left side, one on the right side. That way, if the wind shifts, it's not going to blow over. It's not going to blow over. So one thing I do want to just mention, and you probably know this, but when you're using a spray varnish, you don't want to do it on a really windy day because there's going to be all sorts of back blow and all sorts. It's just not going to work out well. You will not be pleased. One thing you always want to do, I want to shake the can, make sure it's all mixed up, and then I want to do a test spray. I want to make sure this is coming out in a nice fine mist. If it comes out in a stream, it's going to make patterns and lines on my prints. It's not going to be beautiful. So a fine mist. You want to keep this about 12 to 18 inches away from your prints so that that mist can disperse a little bit. Make sure that you are covered properly so your overspray doesn't hit everything beyond the cardboard. I'm going to just go grab a couple more pieces. If you're wondering what all that yellow stuff on the decking is, I live in the south and it is pollen season, which makes me question the wisdom of me being out here spraying. I am probably going to bring these in the house to dry after I've sprayed them, just to make sure I don't end up with pollen on everything. Hooray, spring. Alrighty then. We've already done a test spray. Let's just do it again. Yep, that looks good. And I'm going to just go slow and even across the surface in both directions. That makes sure I get it in the nooks and crannies. I really love these prints. They really came out nice. Very pleased. After you're done spraying, if you hold your can upside down and spray it someplace out of range of your work, that's going to clean your nozzle. And that's it for now. I'm going to move these inside, and I'll see you for the next section. Okay. I spray varnished this print and this print a little bit earlier, and I want to test this golden gloss waterborne varnish. This is something that needs to be mixed prior to being used, and you need to either brush it on, or if you've got a way to spray it, I believe you can mix it so that it can be sent through a sprayer, but I'll be using a brush. I've done some experimenting with it, and I have tried a sponge. I'm not crazy about the results. So I'm going to use kind of a soft brush, and let's just see. I think this one will be my, yeah. We're going to go with this one. All right, so it is 4 parts of varnish to 1 part water. So I'm going to take this half a teaspoon that never needs to see my kitchen again, and I'm going to take 4 of these. Try and get as much of that off of it as I can. And then 1 part water. I'm going to set that aside so I don't make a mess somewhere. I'll cover this before I tip it over. Okay, so I'm going to stir this up. There's really not much to it. Once this is thoroughly mixed, you can set aside your wooden spatula or whatever it is you've used to mix it up. If you wipe it off and maybe even use like a Lysol wipe or something like that on it, you'll be able to use it again. All right. So what I have learned from doing this thus far is that take it easy. I don't want to rub vigorously on here because I don't want to create bubbles and I don't want to create streaks. So I'm going to just work going one direction, and then I'm going to work it back the other direction. But I'm taking my time. I don't want to rush through this because the faster I go, the more prone I am to making bubbles and streaks. If you've watched some of my other videos where I'm working on watercolor paper, I have tried this varnish on the watercolor paper, and if I use the brush, it works really nice. It makes a beautiful coat. I chose the gloss version of it, but I believe there's also a matte. This paper has a lot of texture to it. So I'm going to look at it from an angle because I want to be sure I don't need to go the opposite direction. So I've been primarily going just across it like this. It's a possibility that I need to go up and down as well. Okay, I am not seeing brush streaks, and that makes me wildly happy. So my plan for this piece is to stitch it later to a background. So I want to make sure that I get off the edge. I want to make sure I get this part too because that's going to be part of my artwork in this case. I'm just going to go one more time. Always remembering that these textured papers can be very fragile. All right, I'm going to try and lift it up. You're going to see that some of that varnish soaked through. It's not too bad. I'm not seeing brush marks. And I'm going to just take a quick swipe up this way though, because it doesn't look like it's an even coating. All right, I'm going to call that good. I need to lay this down on a piece of plastic so that it doesn't dry and stick to the craft paper. So just like when I coat it with the inkAID, I take these kinds of papers and I put them on plastic. When I took the tape off of this one, I was a little bit too aggressive and I tore the paper. So I'm going to be real careful with this. And I think I'm going to go this direction this time. So I think that will go easier on that torn part. The spray varnish that I used is Krylon UV. It's a gloss varnish. This golden product is intended for painters, to be honest. And the instructions on it said that you're supposed to give it an isolation coat, which, given that I'm not much of a painter, I was unfamiliar with that. It sounds, after doing a little bit of research, it sounds like it's a barrier to make sure that your acrylic and watercolor paints don't start to react with this product and run the risk of reactivating and dissolving. So I have used this on these prints. I tried it both with the spray coat of varnish, thinking that that would work like that isolation coat, and I've tried it straight on the prints. I have not had any problems with it going straight on the prints. Okay, that looks pretty good. And we're going to go lay it down on the piece of plastic and let it dry. Cleanup. You're probably wondering about cleanup. So when you're finished with this product, if you take a paper towel and squeeze the excess out, I take an antibacterial wipe and try and squeeze a little bit more out, and then I simply wash it in warm soapy water, and my brush is good to go for the next time. This little bit I can throw out. I don't want to put it back in the golden jar because it's been diluted already with water. If I knew I was going to do another coat on something tomorrow and I had more of this left, I might save it. I've got little plastic lids, so I could cover it like that. I don't plan on doing this tomorrow, so I'm just going to let this go. The instructions, by the way, say do not save it. So I'd go with what Golden says until you prove otherwise. Here's what I'm noticing with the Gloss Waterborne Varnish by Golden. It adds a layer of stability to those fine papers that can tend to be so fragile. It made it really easy for me to add some stitch work to this piece, and I'm very happy with it.